Hi, in this video I will show you how to replace and code the injectors on the BMW N43 engine, but the information should be relevant to other engines as well. First I will show you how to remove the injectors with no special tools. Then I will do a mechanical test for the injectors to see if they are leaking. After that I will show you how to replace the gaskets and decoupling elements on all injectors. Then how to replace the injectors, and finally how to code them in the ECU. A few months ago we bought a second car, 1 Series E87 from 2007 with a 1.6 petrol engine, the N43 engine. It felt underpowered from day one, but I thought it is normal for such a small non-turbo engine. Later, when winter came, I noticed that the engine had a rough start in the morning, with the whole car shaking until the engine got warmed up. Then one morning I got the check engine light in the dashboard with a misfire code. I have found a few things that made me suspicious about the injectors. Misfires on random cylinders, fuel pressure dropping when shutting down the engine on the high pressure side, and negative long-term fuel trims, which means the engine was running a rich fuel mixture. After doing some reading on the internet, I found that this engine had bad injectors that BMW had then improved over time through many iterations, the last one being the so-called Index 11 injectors. It made sense to me that I probably had leaky injectors. This would explain the negative fuel trims, the fuel pressure drop on engine stop, and of course the misfires. I have decided to do a mechanical test of the injectors. Remove the injectors from the engine, mount them outside the engine without the electrical connections, and crank the engine to see if any of the injectors were leaking. Before removing the injectors, I have disconnected the battery to prevent the electrical fuel pump from starting while I would disconnect fuel lines. The next step is to remove the stuff above the engine. First remove the microfilter housing. Then remove the two covers from the brake fluid reservoir and the ECU box. Unclip the cable holders. Remove cable for hood switch. Remove two screws for the plastic cover and remove the cover. Remove 4 screws and remove the acoustic cover from the engine. Remove the ignition coils. Remove pressure lines from all injectors, making sure I don't mix them as they are not all the same. First disconnect the pressure lines from the rail to reduce existing fuel pressure if necessary. Fuel must not get into the spark plug shaft. Then disconnect the pressure line from the injector. one by one I mount the pressure lines back on the fuel rail, so I don't mix them, but also to prevent contaminants to enter the fuel rail. Unlock electrical connectors and remove. Release the screw and remove the hold-down bracket that keeps in place a pair of injectors. So there are two brackets in this 4-cylinder engine. I am using a magnet to remove the screw and the bracket. Notice that the bracket has a curve to it to maintain pressure against the injectors. Next I am trying to remove the injectors by hand, which doesn't really work. As I don't have a special tool for removing the injectors, I am using a wire that I loop around the injector base. There's an easier way with less force required. So here I have removed all 4 injectors and I see they are index 9 as marked at the top right side of the injectors. From what I understand, these are crappy injectors and should be replaced with index 11. It is uncommon to have these injectors cleaned or repaired in any way. Next I mount all the injectors outside the engine for the mechanical test. This test will only show if injectors are leaking. Even if they are not leaking, this is not testing if the spray pattern is good or if the injectors are stuck closed or not delivering the proper amount of fuel. After mounting all injectors, I reconnect the battery and crank the engine in order to build fuel pressure. I noticed right away that the first injector is wet. I rechecked after half an hour and the third injector was also wet. It is nowhere as bad as I imagined it would be, but still not okay. At this point I decided to try my luck and only replace the two leaking injectors with new ones, as they are quite expensive. The new injectors are delivered without the decoupling elements, which I had to buy separately and mount them myself. For the other two injectors I only replaced the gaskets and the decoupling elements. Use a blade to remove the old gasket. The new gasket has to be stretched before you can slide it over the injector. I used a pen to slowly stretch the gasket. When I was finally able to mount the gasket, it was loose on the injector as expected. There is a special toolkit for stretching and then compressing the gasket again, but I don't have that. Instead, I use the injector cap from one of the new injectors to compress the gasket. After that, the decoupling element clips on easily. Before mounting the injectors, make sure you write down the calibration numbers from each injector and the cylinder number where each injector will be mounted. This is necessary for coding the injectors in the ECU later. With the old and new injectors prepared, I go ahead and mount them back into the engine. First attach the fuel lines by hand and then put the bracket in place. I discovered the easier way to get the bracket into its place is by using a bent wire, then using the magnet to position the screw in its place. The torque required for this screw is 30 Newton meters. After this, finish tightening the pressure line nuts to 23 Newton meters. Be aware that these lines are one use only and should be replaced if removed. Here I was lucky enough that they did not leak, but if they do, it is kind of expected and they need to be replaced with new ones. First tighten the injector side and then the fuel rail side. Plug the electrical connectors back and the ignition coils. Reconnect the battery and continue with preparations before starting the engine. I am first deleting the errors that were created by cranking the engine with disconnected injectors. Next step is to recode the injectors, and I am using ISTA Plus for this process. After connecting the laptop to the OBD port of the car, it is necessary to perform the complete identification operation in ISTA. Then go to Vehicle Management, Service Functions, Powertrain, Engine Electronics, Adjustment Functions, and finally to adjust injectors. Then run the ABL for injector quantity compensation. Follow the steps to register the injectors. Click No as we don't have a new DME and click Continue. Choose Enter New Adjustment Values and click Continue. Type in the cylinder number and click Continue. Type in the values for the injector on cylinder 1 and continue. These steps have to be followed for each injector one by one and then save adjustment values. Next, delete adaptations. This is necessary for the engine to rebuild adaptation values with new injectors. Follow the steps as indicated on the screen. I assume the engine will update the adaptation in time even without these steps, but it will probably be a longer process. I have found step-by-step procedure for the readaptation of the engine on the internet, with in-depth details on the Beamer Profs page, which I highly recommend. I won't go into those details here. It involves multiple long trips at steady speed. Here I have just started the engine for the first time. No misfires so far, and fuel trims are at 0 as I have just deleted adaptations. All good. Or maybe not really. As soon as the engine goes into closed loop, I see negative fuel trims again. Also, the fuel pressure still drops on engine shutdown. Much slower, but still dropping. I then follow the procedure for readaptation of the engine, taking some long trips during which I still got some misfires, which can be ignored before the whole process is finished. Unfortunately, the next day I got more misfires and again check engine light. At this point I have decided not to waste more time on further investigations and just replace the two old injectors with new ones as well. When all was done, I still see a slow drop in fuel pressure on engine shutdown, which I will have to investigate at a later time. Otherwise, I can confirm the engine is running smooth and it is a lot more responsive. No more hesitations, no more shaking, and it feels like it's not that underpowered after all. It's quite a nice, fun little engine. It feels like a different engine. Thank you for watching.